The following is intended for mature audiences. Let's open this episode up with a long overdue 911 call.
Two 20211, do you need police, fire, or medical?
Police.
To what address?
The Las Vegas Athletic Club.
The Northwest, the one by Rainbow.
Which one? Okay, what's going on there?
The Northwest, the one by Rainbow.
Okay, what's going on there?
Yeah, I think I saw someone come in with an AR.
Come into the Las Vegas Athletic Club?
Yes.
How many minutes ago did you see that?
Just right now.
So 1 minute ago?
Yeah, like right now.
What color gun was it?
It was a black.
Okay, and you're pretty certain it was? Was he by himself?
Yes, I think there's shots.
911 emergency. Police, fire, or medical? Hello, can you hear me? Hello? Hello, anyone there?
New fear unlocked. Mass shootings at the gym. And as someone on high alert anywhere I go, the gym was the one place I could let my guard down. I guess that's over. This all went down in Las Vegas at the Las Vegas Athletic Club on Rainbow Boulevard, and it happened right in the middle of the day, around 1:30 p.m. on Friday, May 16th. People were just working out, going about their day like normal, and then this guy walks in, armed. His name is Daniel Ortega, 34 years old, from North Las Vegas. He reportedly worked as a bellman on the Strip, so someone you might see in a hotel, helping with bags, totally normal job. But on this day, he shows up at the gym carrying an Olympic Arms PCR 223 rifle, and he's got multiple magazines of ammunition on him. It's clear he didn't just randomly bring a gun. This obviously was planned. So Ortega starts pacing around near the front desk, like he's scoping things out. He briefly speaks to one of the employees, nothing dramatic, but then out of nowhere, he raises the rifle and just starts firing. His first victim was Edgar Quinones, a longtime employee at the gym. People knew him, he was well loved, and in an instant, he was gone. After that, Ortega starts chasing another employee through the gym, firing as he runs. But here's where everything could have gotten much worse. See, Ortega's gun ends up jamming. Assistant Sheriff Jamie Prosser later said that this malfunction was what stopped the situation from becoming a full-on massacre. While all that's happening, 911 calls are pouring in. People are hiding, trying to stay alive, and just a few minutes later, around 1:39 p.m., 3 officers from Las Vegas Metro Police arrive, Kate Urban, Skeeter Black, and Aaron Javier, and these guys didn't wait. Officer Javier actually fired through a window to try to stop Ortega, while officers Urban and Black confronted him head-on. Now, Ortega tried to run, but the officers shot him. He was taken into custody and treated right there at the scene, but he later died at the hospital. Inside the gym, police found Quinones tragically already gone and 3 others wounded. A 4th gunshot victim later showed up at a hospital on their own. Thankfully, all the survivors are expected to recover, considering how bad this whole situation could have gone. Now, there's this one guy, John Tiffin, who was actually inside the gym when everything went down, and this part's pretty amazing. So John had just wrapped up a workout. He was leaving the gym when he suddenly heard this loud boom, but at first he thought someone just dropped some heavy weights, because you know how some people, they be out here in the gym trying to show off, slamming barbells, grunting super loud. So he just thought it was like totally like normal gym noises. But then he hears another boom, and then he hears a third bang, and this one ends up knocking him forward and straight to the ground. So he reaches back, he touches a spot where he feels pain, and he pulls his hand away and it's covered in blood. And that's the moment that it hit him that something was wrong. And it turns out he had been hit twice. One bullet went into his hip and came out of the other side, But the second one, that one lodged itself into a muscle in his back. John says that he had just finished a chest and back workout, so his back muscles were all tight and flexed, and apparently this is what saved his life because the bullet hit the muscle and stopped. It didn't go deep enough to hit any of his organs. He mentions that the force, the impact of the bullet slamming into the muscle, is what threw him to the ground. And he makes his point, if the bullet had gone through him instead of getting stuck, that might have been it for him. So Ortega didn't know any of the victims. He was a gym member, sure, but police say there was no personal connection to anyone he shot. No motives been confirmed, and the investigation's unfortunately still ongoing. So we're left with no clear reason why, but if Ortega had lived, he would have been hit with a stack of charges: 3 counts of attempted murder, 3 counts of assault on a protected person, usually meaning law enforcement, and 5 counts of assault with a deadly weapon. And to those of you who have listened before, I've gone on many rants about gun violence, and all I can say here is please just pay attention to your surroundings, because I don't think, and I really hate to say this, but I don't think, at least in this timeline, we are going to see the end of these mass shootings. Welcome to a world where darkness and mystery converge. Navigate the depths of horror and true crime and join a society beyond the ordinary, where buzzworthy topics, paranormal tales, and listener-submitted experiences blend into a realm of the unknown. You have crossed into a place where the unusual and the terrifying are just the beginning. My name is Ralph Anthony, and welcome to the Scream Society podcast. What is going on, everyone? Welcome into another chaotic edition of this Friday podcast from you know where. I know it's been a while, but Spotify stopped lifting up their up-and-coming creators, so I couldn't make this my career path like I had hoped. So yeah, I've been working. Are we all doing okay out there? Because the fact that that demonic entity, James Charles, still walks free with a platform guarantees we're never getting out of this hellscape. So believe me when I tell you, I hope you're all hanging in there. But despite all of that, I've got a jam-packed episode, so let's get into it. It's time for Sinister Subjects. Cue the jingle. Last episode, I covered Coachella and how Lady Gaga was being criticized and accused of being demonic for a very dark and gothic performance. Well, per usual, we are always focused on other shit while actual demonic shit is taking place, right? And I am no stranger to over-worrying, over-analyzing, over-stressing, because at Coachella, I thought, gosh, this must be really scary to be so out in the open for anyone to do something terrible to someone as high profile as Lady Gaga, right? Okay, so listen to this because it's wild. Lady Gaga just broke the record for the most attended concert by a female artist in history. Over 2 million people showed up to see her perform her Coachella set at a free concert at Copacabana Beach in Brazil back on May 3rd. That's insane. Like, whole cities don't even have that many people. And it was her first show in Brazil in over a decade. So it was a big deal. The next morning, police revealed that the concert had actually been the target of a planned terrorist attack. So while everyone was out there singing Rain on Me, waiting for the show to start, there was an online hate group allegedly plotting violence against the crowd. Brazilian police said they raided the homes of 15 suspects and arrested 3 people. One of them was caught with illegal weapons. Another was a teenager found with child abuse material, and a third was reportedly planning to kill a child during what they called a satanic ritual at the concert. Now, that person was charged with terrorism. So police said that the group had talked about using Molotov cocktails and homemade bombs, and it looks like the motive might have been anti-LGBTQ plus hate, but here's the thing. They didn't actually find any explosives, which has people wondering if they really had the means to pull something like this off, or if it was just more about trying to scare people or get attention online. Now, something that's kind of twisted here is the group had been posing as Lady Gaga fans online to recruit teens into their plan. Police said they framed it like a challenge, like, join us, be part of something big, and called the whole thing Operation Fake Monster, which is a play on Lady Gaga's fan base, The Little Monsters. And I mean, they could have gone a little more creative with it. This group isn't a one-off either. Experts say they're part of a larger trend of online extremist communities that are spreading globally. Like, these aren't just your typical political extremists, they're more like chaotic, violent internet cults. No real structure, no clear ideology, just violence for the sake of violence. And they like to hang out in places like Discord, Telegram, even Minecraft and Roblox, and they specifically go after teenagers. One expert, a sociologist named Cynthia Miller Idris, says these kinds of groups are called nihilistic violent extremist networks, meaning they basically believe in nothing but destruction. They feed kids increasingly violent and disturbing content until they're desensitized to it, then manipulate them into doing awful things, sometimes for attention, sometimes just because they can. Some of these groups actually brag about getting kids to, how do I say this, self-harm or even take their own lives on live streams. These groups target kids who are also in a very vulnerable state, like teens who are lonely, disabled, or just trying to find a place to belong. Sometimes they pretend to be romantic partners to gain trust, and once they've pulled someone in, it becomes this horrible cycle of manipulation, shame, and control. Authorities say we're only beginning to understand how dangerous this stuff really is. The FBI has even warned parents to look out for kids wearing long sleeves in hot weather, not for fashion reasons, but because some of these groups encourage cutting on camera. Just sick. What ties all of this together is that these groups are fueled by nihilism, like literally just wanting to burn everything down. They don't have one agenda. Some are neo-Nazis. Some are just doing it for attention or even sexual gratification, but it's just all terrifying. Now, Lady Gaga and her team were not informed about the bomb threat before or during the concert and only became aware of it afterward through the media's reports on it. And authorities in Brazil claim they didn't mention it before or during because it would have erupted in absolute chaos. Now, I have to commend and at the same time criticize them because I do understand. I commend them for taking care of it and acting on it versus waiting until something actually happened. But at the same time, that puts these artists in potential dangerous situations, right? And we really are in a desensitized society at the moment. And speaking of a desensitized society, this next story is really disturbing and honestly, it breaks my heart. So on May 13th, in Jalisco, Mexico, 23-year-old beauty influencer Valeria Marquez was literally live streaming on TikTok from her salon Blossom Beauty Lounge when she was shot and killed on live. Now, Valeria wasn't just some random person online. She had over 149,000 followers on Instagram and 114,000 on TikTok. She was building something. She was building a brand, a life. She had just posted a mirror selfie to her stories prior to her death. Her last few posts were just like modeling shots, makeup looks, and just her doing her thing. And then suddenly she's gone. But what really makes this story feel like a horror movie is what happened before the shooting. Because earlier that same day, a guy shows up at her salon wearing a mask and posing as a delivery man. He says he's got this super expensive gift for Valeria, but he won't leave it with the staff. He says it has to be delivered to her in person. Red flag number one. And he's not alone here. There's a second man waiting outside on a motorcycle. So fast forward a few hours later, Valeria arrives at the salon and finds out these guys had been asking for her. And understandably so, she gets a little freaked out. And it is a little sketchy, and I'll get into the theories a bit later, but apparently she had a friend with her named Vivian and another who allegedly worked at the salon named Erica. Now, on her live stream, and this is so creepy, this part, because you can hear Valeria say, maybe they're going to try and kill me. And then minutes later, the two men came back. One of them walks in and asks if Valeria is there. And according to prosecutors, he didn't even know what she had looked like, which tells you that this maybe wasn't personal. This was business, and what happens next is just absolutely heartbreaking. He pulls out a gun and opens fire right there in the salon while she's still live streaming. So in the live stream, which she had muted once the men came in, you see her talking. Then she looks down at her chest or her stomach area and grabs that area. Then as she's looking down, you see two bullets enter the top of her head, and her lifeless body is now on display for thousands of people to see on her live stream. Now, authorities believe these men were hired hitmen, possibly working for a cartel or an organized crime group. And get this, because it gets even darker. Just hours before Valeria's murder, in the same area, two men on a motorcycle, sound familiar, killed a former congressman. So now investigators are asking, are these two murders connected? Was this part of a coordinated hit list? Or was Valeria simply in the wrong place at the wrong time? Now, here's where the internet really lost it, because the live stream didn't end immediately after she was on camera dead. Short after, there is this moment where the girl Erica I had mentioned earlier, who works at the shop allegedly, you can see her in the video calmly reaching over and turning the phone off. And netizens online have been analyzing this moment over and over, including myself, because who is she? Why did she do that? Some say she was her actual friend. Some say she just worked there. And many people are pointing out the fact that she had this blank stare when she was turning the camera off. There was like no sign of shock, no sign that she had been crying or was scared, or just no reaction to what had just happened. And I know some people can say that maybe that was her showing shock, like maybe she didn't want Valeria's death to be broadcast, so that's why she grabbed the phone and shut the live off. Maybe it was instinct, or maybe she was just trying to protect Valeria's dignity or something. Totally possible. People react to trauma in weird ways. I can identify that. But then there's the other theory that she knew something, because the way she moves, it's quiet, it's deliberate, and she doesn't panic. It's like chillingly calm. And that's where I'm coming from. Like a state of shock, like you still just don't behave normally. And she seemed to have been behaving normally. So now there's a whole wave of internet detectives wondering if she had prior knowledge, perhaps. Was she involved? Did she help set up Valeria? Or was she just trying to shut down the live stream to stop the killers from realizing that they were being broadcasted? Not to mention the unseen friend Vivian. What happened to her? Just so many unanswered questions, and no one is talking or giving any more info. The only info that is getting put out now are just rumors and all of these allegations on TikTok and true crime talk and just all of that. So from sketchy friends to even Valeria having said before that if anything were to happen to her, it would be because of her ex-boyfriend who had allegedly become unhinged after they had broken up. And other motives and theories floating around are cartel ordered a hit, a mistaken identity, jealousy or envy from the friends, or maybe even a warning to other influencers. And this one's quite terrifying, but worth mentioning because some people believe influencers in certain parts of the world are becoming targets just for having fame, money, or visibility. The word femicide has even been getting thrown around out there because days after Valeria's death on May 20th, Maria Jose Estupiñan, a Colombian influencer, was also shot and killed, mirroring this case. And like I said earlier, it's just a bunch of speculation and theories, and hopefully some justice can be served here. Valeria has already been buried. I believe the funeral happened like 2 or 3 days later. Her death has just left behind more questions than actual answers. But the one thing that's crystal clear here to me is this doesn't come off or seem like a random act of violence. I think this was definitely something calculated, and I know someone out there knows something. Moving on. And I wasn't planning on this episode being so dark, but here we are. And this one gets even worse. There's this guy, Yostin Andres Mosquera, if that's how you pronounce his name. He's this 35-year-old Colombian national who also worked in porn, gay porn, and we're talking extreme, fetish-heavy stuff. Anyway, he'd been flying back and forth from Colombia to the UK to meet up with this older couple, Albert Alfonso and Paul Longworth. They had a thing going on, mostly with Alfonso, and it involved sex, money, and just a whole lot of filmed content that was, let's just say, not for the faint of heart. Now, on July 8th, 2024, something horrific happened in their West London apartment. According to prosecutors, Mosquera killed both men, and not just killed, decapitated and dismembered them. Longworth, who was 71, was allegedly hit in the back of the head with a hammer. Alfonso, who was 62, was stabbed multiple times while they were reportedly having sex. And yes, the whole thing was caught on video. It gets worse though. Mosquera didn't just panic and flee or call the police. Nope. Instead, he put their severed heads in a chest freezer right there in the apartment and stuffed the rest of the remains into a suitcase. And here's where it goes fully off the rails. You see, 2 days later, on July 10th, a cyclist in Bristol, which is like 100 miles from London, spots this guy near the Clifton Suspension Bridge. He's standing there with a big red suitcase, just hanging out. The cyclist actually chats him up, thinking he's maybe a tourist who got lost or something. Mosquera tells him, oh, it's just car parts in the bag. But no, inside the suitcase, the dismembered bodies of Alfonso and Longworth. And if that wasn't enough, he also had another large silver trunk with him full of more body parts, just out in public. Now, back in the apartment, police later found the couple's heads in the freezer. So you're probably asking, why did this happen? And that's what the court is trying to figure out, because the trial began this year at the end of April, and prosecutors say Mosquera had been paid to have this extreme sex with Alfonso, but somewhere along the way, something snapped. They believe Longworth, the older partner who wasn't involved in the sex acts, was killed first, and then Alfonso. And get this, after the murders, Mosquera was allegedly singing and dancing in the apartment. He's now admitted to the manslaughter of Alfonso, but not murder. Prosecutors said he could hardly deny the killing because it's all on camera. It's all in the evidence. Further details claim that apparently Alfonso was into this whole dynamic where Mosquera and another guy would do these degrading filmed sex acts. Longworth knew about it but didn't participate. The videos were reportedly posted online, and Mosquera was described in court as a pornographic performer. So this wasn't a one-time thing. They had a whole situation going on, even traveling back and forth between the UK and Colombia to see each other. But after the murders, Mascara allegedly tried to transfer over $5,000 into his own account, withdrew over $1,000 in cash, and even made a PowerPoint presentation with the couple's banking details. Like, who does this? And it doesn't even stop there, because in the weeks leading up to the killings, Mascara had apparently been Googling stuff like serial killers of London, Jack the Ripper movies, the value of the couple's home, and he also searched for a chest freezer on Facebook Marketplace, which, yeah, manslaughter? Really? This right here is exactly why. This is exactly why I've never been into public hookups or meeting up with strangers. Not because I'm a prude, not because I'm judgy. It's because I think people out here are demonic. I'll keep my peace and my pieces right where they belong. Thank you. This is demonic. And I'm not talking about James Charles here, but everyone's heard of that creepy doll Annabelle from the Conjuring movies, right? The one with the creepy little porcelain face. Well, the real doll is currently on her version of a nationwide Eras tour. Apparently, they've packed her up and started hauling her around the US as part of this traveling event called Devils on the Run. So the tour kicked off in May of 2025, and people are showing up, thousands actually, all eager to lay eyes on what some folks genuinely believe is a demon-possessed object. She's already made stops in a few states, and it's been wild. And for clarification, allegedly demons cannot possess dolls but simply attach itself to the doll. Now, this whole thing is put on by the New England Society for Psychic Research, or NESPR for short, which is the same group started by Ed and Lorraine Warren, the OG ghost hunting couple. The Warrens used to keep Annabelle locked up in their occult museum in Connecticut behind glass with a big old "do not open under any circumstance" sign. We've all seen it in the movies, but the museum closed down because of zoning issues, and their son-in-law, Tony Spera, runs NESPR and decided to take Annabelle on tour. And it's like a horror lover's dream / nightmare combo. The tour started with the multi-day event at the West Virginia State Penitentiary, which, by the way, is already one of the most haunted places in the country. So from May 8th to the 11th, they called it WVP Lockdown with Annabelle, and it included overnight ghost hunts, lectures from demonologists, and yes, an up-close look at the actual Annabelle doll under heavy supervision, of course. Then, not even a week later, Annabelle showed up at the Psychic and Spirit Fest in San Antonio, Texas, at Victoria's Black Swan Inn, another place with serious spooky vibes. That event had everything: mediums, psychics, spiritual advisors, demonologists, just like a supernatural Comic-Con. I actually need to attend one of these things, seriously. Now, here's the thing. The real Annabelle, she doesn't look like her Hollywood version. She's not porcelain and terrifying. She's still kind of terrifying, but she's actually just a plain old Raggedy Ann doll. But according to the Warrens, looks are deceiving. They claim she is used as a vessel by something pretending to be a sweet little girl spirit, but actually it was demonic. There were stories of her moving on her own, growling, even attacking people who disrespected her. Lorraine Warren herself reportedly wouldn't even look the doll in the eyes because of how evil she believed that the doll was. And you know what? If Lorraine Warren was scared of something, I'm scared of it too. Well, NESPR says people have been begging for years to see Annabelle up close, and since the museum's closed, this tour is their way of giving the public what they want and raising money to eventually open a new museum, which sounds reasonable, but not to some people, especially religious leaders and paranormal experts, because one Catholic demonologist literally said, "You don't treat something like Annabelle as a novelty. If you believe in its history, you understand the risks. If you don't, then you're provoking something you don't respect." And to be fair, the organizers are super strict about how they handle her. The doll is always encased, nobody's allowed to touch it, and protective prayers are said at every stop. There's security, there are spiritual safety protocols. And of course, the tour has gone viral. TikTok and Instagram are blowing up with clips of people meeting Annabelle, sharing behind the scenes footage, and doing all kinds of spooky little Q&As. And it's important to note that Annabelle was reported missing on May 24th. However, that was debunked. But here's where it gets really freaky. Because during her most recent appearance in New Orleans, things took a seriously dark turn. One TikTok user posted a video that's gotten a ton of attention. She pointed out that while Annabelle was in New Orleans, 10 convicted murderers escaped from a nearby prison. And before they ran, they left behind a handwritten note that said, "Too easy." And it gets worse because just days later, this old Louisiana plantation house, one that had been standing for years, mysteriously caught fire and burned to the ground with no clear cause or explanation. So, yeah. This tour was supposed to just be a spooky little thrill ride for horror lovers, but now locals and netizens around are getting nervous. And I will be watching, of course, to see how the rest of this tour plays out. Let's get into Terrifying But True. Welcome into Terrifying But True, the one segment where I choose a random paranormal or a true crime case, except this time, I'm switching it up. For this episode, we're diving headfirst into one of the most unhinged horror franchises ever made, Final Destination. You know, the one where death's always watching, and if you cheat it, it'll find a way to collect. And with the new film out, Final Destination Bloodlines, I felt it was only necessary. But here's the real twist. As ridiculous and over the top and highly CGI'd as some of these deaths are, a shocking number of them have happened in real life. I'm talking pool drains that disembowel, exploding barbecue pits, and yes, even that infamous logging truck scene that traumatized an entire generation of drivers. I still switch lanes every time. So I think it's safe to say that you should all grab a blanket, maybe a helmet, and whatever you do, don't ignore the signs, because these deaths may be fictional, but their real life counterparts are terrifying and unfortunately very true. Let's get into it. When the unthinkable becomes reality, we find ourselves questioning everything, as some stories are too terrifying but true. So here's a wild little origin story to kick this off. Writer Jeffrey Reddick originally pitched what would become the original first film, Final Destination, as an episode of hit TV show The X-Files. It was going to be a freaky little case for Mulder and Scully, but a friend convinced him to turn it into a feature film, and eventually it ended up with New Line Cinema, where horror legends James Wong and Glenn Morgan reworked it into the twisted roller coaster of a franchise that we all know. But the real inspiration came from a story Reddick read on a flight, because of course it did. He'd been flying home from Kentucky when he came across this article about a woman on vacation in Hawaii. Her mom called her and said, "Don't take the flight tomorrow. I've got a really bad feeling." So the woman changed her plans, and the flight she was supposed to be on crashed. That's when Jeffrey Reddick thought, wait, what if she was supposed to die on that flight? What if death came back for her later? That's when, boom, the seed was planted. And while death didn't claim her then and there, it has come for a number of other unfortunate souls. Take Jessica Redfield, an aspiring sportscaster. In 2012, she had a weird gut feeling at a Toronto mall and stepped outside to grab a breath of fresh air. Then, minutes later, a mass shooting erupted inside. She avoided disaster, but unfortunately, just a month later, she was killed during the Aurora, Colorado movie theater shooting during The Dark Knight Rises premiere. Then you have Hilda Yolanda Mayol, who worked at a restaurant inside the World Trade Center. She survived the 9/11 attacks, which is incredible, until she boarded American Airlines Flight 587 just 2 months later and died when the plane crashed in Queens. And then there's the case of David Furr, a college basketball player for the University of Evansville. In 1977, his team died in a plane crash, but David wasn't on board because of an ankle injury. Fate had spared him until 2 weeks later, when he and his brother were killed by a drunk driver. Or what about Ye Ming Wan, a 16-year-old who survived the crash of Asian Airlines Flight 214, only to be run over and killed by a rescue vehicle in the chaos afterward. And finally, there's Johanna Gantler, who missed her flight, Air France Flight 447, that crashed and killed everyone on board. However, on her drive home from the airport, she died in a car accident. And getting further into this, and freaky enough, there are actually real-life cases of people meeting their demise with creepy similarities to the first 5 films. In The Final Destination, or what I like to call Final Abomination 4, there's the character of Hunt, who dives into the deep end of a public pool and ends up getting his ass literally vacuum sealed to the bottom by the drain. The pressure builds until his intestines get sucked out and shot across the pool deck. Over the top? Absolutely, but not entirely impossible here, because there's been real cases of swimmers, especially children, getting trapped by pool drains. Most of the time they are rescued, but in 2007, 2 years before the 4th movie came out, Abigail Taylor sat on a similar drain and suffered a near identical injury. She lost most of her small intestine. However, she survived the incident and she lived for a few months after several surgeries, but ultimately died. Her story has thankfully led to new laws about anti-entrapment drain covers across the US alone. Then there's a nail gun kill in Final Destination 3, which is one of my faves, and a time where the franchise mixed practical with digital effects tastefully. It happens after Ian McKinley escapes death in a Home Depot-like store, but his poor girlfriend Erin trips and falls back, catching a nail gun clip to the back of her skull. Yeah, this death sounds way out there, but pneumatic nail gun accidents happen more than we all know. In 2023, a freak accident occurred where a nail ricocheted and shot up through a carpenter's tongue. He lived, but back in 2013, a worker using a gun with a safety trigger removed accidentally fired a nail gun straight through his own eye, which he didn't survive. What about elevators? How do we feel about elevators? Do we remember Nora's death in Final Destination 2, where her head gets caught in the doors and popped off? It's the stuff of nightmares, and horrifyingly, it's happened. In 1995, a man trying to hold the door for someone in the Bronx was beheaded. And you know that moment in Final Destination where Laurie falls into an escalator and gets chewed up by the gears? That's nightmare fuel right there, but a version of it actually happened in 2015 in Beijing. A mother noticed a loose panel at the top of an escalator. Just as she and her son stepped off, the floor gave way. She managed to push him to safety, then was swallowed by the machine herself. There's also that gym scene when the stack machine crushes Lewis's head in Final Destination 3. While that machine was exaggerated, meaning the film created that specific machine for the movie, it doesn't exist. Gym accidents happen all the time. In 2017, a home gym fell over and pinned a man by the neck. He had a heart attack and died. Then in 2025, medical student Mohammed Faraj was doing calf raises at a gym when a heavy bar dropped and forced his neck to the ground. He died at the scene. And then there's the classic barbecue explosion. Now, at the end of Final Destination 2, just when you think it's over, poor Brian gets blown up by a rogue propane tank. Now, flying libs don't normally land on plates of loved ones. However, barbecue pit disasters are very real. One instance took place in 2013 at a church cookout when a buildup of gas ignited the moment Doug Grip was preparing for a barbecue. He lit the grill, then the metal door swung open so violently it struck and killed him instantly. But of course, no death in the series is more iconic than the logging truck, because Final Destination 2 made everyone fear driving behind one, and for good reason. I mean, like I said, I still change lanes. In October of 2024, a man in North Carolina died after rear-ending a logging truck, sending a log straight through his windshield and into his abdomen. In December that same year, a couple in North Dakota, Gary Vincent and fiancée Siku Oliveros, died in a nearly identical crash. And the list just keeps going. More recently, in Argentina at the screening of the 6th newest film, Final Destination Bloodlines. The theater collapsed and injured one woman watching. Can you imagine at the movie theater watching one of these movies and the actual movie theater collapses down on you? No one died, fortunately. So yeah, if Final Destination taught us anything, it's that death is ruthless, creative, and maybe a little dramatic. But if real life has taught us anything, it's that reality really is stranger and scarier than fiction. And now let's dive into Ralph versus the Rot, where I take on your questions and do my best to give you a fair perspective and advice, because society is decaying and I'm here to call it out. As always, if you would like me to share an experience of yours, share something you find creepy or interesting, or simply want to ask me a question, send an email to screamsocietypodcast@gmail.com, or head on over to beacons.ai/the Scream Society and click on the Society submissions link. Remember, everything remains anonymous. Let's get into these questions, and in this case, some comments. No question, I just want to say there's this change in you that I love. You're glowing. Am I? Or maybe I just have on too much bronzer. That was stupid. No, I think I'm definitely trying to work on myself internally a lot more than I was. And I know we can say that a lot and they're not actually be changed. But if there's one thing I learned, it's just that we can all be on these journeys. And unfortunately, some of us, it's just like an ongoing process. I don't think I'm ever going to reach this goal, but I think as long as I'm always working toward bettering myself, I think that's what really counts. There shouldn't be an end goal that you are trying to reach. It should be something that you are wanting to continue to do continuously. That was a lot of continues in a sentence. But what I mean by all of that work is just accepting compliments and not shriveling into a ball and going crazy because someone just complimented me, and not being a people pleaser, boundaries. And I'm not kidding. Once you start doing things for you, life will seem less overwhelming. Let me just say, yes, absolutely. You will find out who your real friends are when you start creating boundaries, when you start saying no and getting out of that people-pleasing mindset. And I'm sure it comes off as you're being narcissistic or selfish, but honestly, just avoid all of that low vibrational judgment. And I'm not saying to be a monster, but I think it's really important to recognize if something isn't going to add value to you, then it's okay to step back. Be realistic about shit. Be honest with yourself. But yeah, thank you for noticing. I'm definitely trying here. I feel like you always ask what we want to see more of, but what do you want to see more of for the Scream Society in 2025? That's a good one. I think more guest spots on other podcasts aside from being the Halloween guest, if that makes sense. I haven't had the chance to get on other podcasts with this podcast as much as I did before rebranding. I think I have a lot more to offer than just spooky. I don't know, maybe I'm just unapproachable. Maybe people think I'm just a monster. I don't know, but on the positive side, I am booked to be on Words of the Witches for the second time. So shout out, Kevin. You're just always so sweet to me. And it's a charm podcast. So what more could I ask for? I have one more coming up, which seems really cool. More on that soon. But yeah, if any of my podcast buddies are out there listening, book me. What's a haunted location most people haven't heard of, but absolutely should? Another great question. Ooh. So, okay, where I'm from, one of the neighboring cities used to have a sanitarium. Wolfe Manor was its name, which was closed down and then turned into a haunted attraction. But since then, it has been demolished. But there were stories, obviously, of abused patients and, of course, deaths there. Then I remember hearing stories of a few hauntings and even some of a man-baby demon thing. I just got chills saying that. But I think it was around 2014 before it was demolished. One of my aunts lived across the street from it, so my cousins and I all walked to see it up close and personal. And maybe it was because of the lore, but it just felt very cold and uncomfortable. But I know for a fact I think it actually, yeah, I think it was on one of those ghost shows. Actually, I think it was like on multiple of those shows, but even then, I still feel like not a lot of people talk about this. And I think hold on. Let me see if I could pull up the audio.
My ghost story started when I had a breath of air blown on the back of my neck at the Wolfe Manor. In 1995, I was looking for a location for a Halloween attraction in the Clovis, Fresno area. I ran across this location, and on the outside of the building, it said Clovis Convalescent Hospital. The house was built in the early 1920s, and soon after, Mrs. Townsend purchased the home to build it into the Clovis Sanitarium. So the mansion itself is the original Clovis Sanitarium. First of all, it's huge. The mansion is 8,000 square feet. It's 4 stories tall. It has a full basement and 3 stories up above. I was amazed, and I ended up purchasing the property and ran the Halloween attraction. Soon after, I myself started having experiences. During the Halloween attraction, we were getting ready to open. That's when something came up and touched me on my lower back. I asked the gentleman that I was talking to, who was just behind me? And he said, Todd, there's nobody behind you. And I said, come on, Chad, please tell me there was someone behind me. I turned around really quickly as well. I didn't see anyone. Another major incident that happened to me is I was decorating a wall. My back was towards the doors, and out of the corner of my eye, I saw something black standing in the doorway. There was a full-figured man. I saw the legs. I saw the arms. I saw the hands. I saw the shoulders, neck. I saw the outline of the head, and it was standing in the doorway, and it just came straight up to me within just a second. I was absolutely horrified. Whoever was with me wanted me to know he was right here. I jumped, and then it was gone. Soon after, one of the cast members said she wanted to work in the house that night. We put her in this closet, and I said when guests walk by, just kind of come out of the closet a little bit and frighten the people. 20 minutes later, she found me. Her mouth was dry. I could tell she was very nervous. I pulled her off to the side, and I asked, what's going on? And she said, Todd, something put their hands on my shoulders and pulled me back into that closet. At that point, I knew that something was happening in that house, and it wasn't just about me. We've heard from a lot of nurses that used to work there that there was some abuse. You can see where there would be 4 or 5 beds per room. And so you just felt like the patients were really kind of shoved up in these rooms. They knew that the patients weren't being treated very well. And actually, one nurse came in the house during a ghost tour, and she broke down. She just started telling us stories, and she was there kind of to apologize. She said, I was not nice to the patients here. So the Wolfe Manor, the Clovis Sanitarium, was a place where really people came to die. I met Donna Raymond when she came on a private ghost tour. At the time, I did not know she was a sensitive.
As soon as I walked through the front door, I was speechless. The house looked freaky, for one thing. It was very dark. And then all these emotions came over me of sadness and despair and depression. I didn't quite know what was going on. I hadn't had that before. And so we started to go through the house, and I just kept getting these emotions, depressed, sad, confused, and I didn't know where they were coming from. I feel that there were once patients there, and they just haven't left. I go into places and I feel energies, and it usually starts with the energy I walk into. Then I can get, whether it's a male or female, female's energy are lighter and males are much more grounded to the earth.
About an hour into the investigation, we ended up on the 3rd floor. We were in a room, and to me, it was just another room in the mansion.
It's the only room in the house that has furniture, and I kept getting my attention drawn to this chair, and I kept thinking, there's somebody sitting there.
She said, Todd, for some reason, this entity that's in this room, it's a female, and she's right over there. She said, Todd, she's wanting me to let you know her name is Mary. And for some reason, she doesn't want you to touch any of her furniture in her bedroom. Months later, another group called me up and said, Todd, we've heard this place is haunted. We would like to come in and do an investigation. So they brought in a psychic as well. And we went into that same room. And they told me the identical story. This room is really crazy in here, and there's a female, and she has this message that you need to know that her name is Mary. I believe that Mary was one of the patients there, and for some reason, she does not want to leave. Another major incident that happened to me is we just got done filming. We went back to look at the footage that we shot, and we realized there was something in Mary's bathroom. And it looks like a small child with a larger head crouched all the way over in like a fetal position. It looks exactly like a person sitting in there, like they're hiding.
Pretty spooky, right?
When I saw the picture of the spirit, I definitely felt that this man baby is something that has never been human, is inhuman, and could definitely hurt somebody. When people tell me that they don't believe in spirits and that this is all nonsense, I say, come to the Wolf. It's one of the few places that is incredibly haunted, that almost everybody who goes there has an experience, whether they're touched, their hair's played with, they feel a cold spot. Almost everybody has some kind of occurrence happen at the Wolfe Manor.
Would I be afraid to go to the Wolfe Manor alone at night? Absolutely. Am I a believer now? Absolutely.
Before I wrap up, I just want to give a huge shout out and thank you to those of you who submitted. If you've sent in questions or stories, don't worry, I will get to them. I just try to stay within the hour. Don't want to go too much over because I know our attention rate is declining by the day. But catch me on my personal socials, Ralph Anthony with 3 Ys, Scream Society Podcast, Instagram, TikTok, all of it. And until next time, I will scare you all on the next one. Thank you for tuning into the Scream Society podcast, hosted, written, produced, and edited by yours truly, Ralph Anthony. Help the society grow by subscribing on your favorite platform and leave a rating and review. I always strive for 5s. Have a horror or paranormal experience? Want me to answer your questions on the show? Submit to beacons.ai/The Scream Society. Connect with the podcast on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube at Scream Society Podcast. And until next time, I'll scare you on the next episode.